Yeah, so I 100%. I didn't. There were balance issues. I don't know if they were necessarily signs. I think they're signs of a just normal development process in the game. But the production issues were huge. I remember at one point demoing the game to somebody, and they wanted Union, and this was right at the point where they kind of discontinued a lot of their metal models, and it was just couldn't buy it.
Regular listeners already know how much I like Guildball. I think Guildball is probably one of the best mini games that's ever been made. But it's had quite a roller coaster of a ride, from a Kickstarter that was successful to really being maybe the apex of mini competitive gaming to its eventual demise. I have 3 former Guildball podcasters on the show to talk about that entire journey, from how they found out about it, why they fell in love with it, when it was the apex of competitive gaming, to signs of its demise, and then finally when Steamforged ended the game. So sit back and enjoy the rise and fall of Guildball.
Playing a tabletop strategy game allows you to unplug and test your skills against friends. Every week, Third Floor Wars delivers useful strategies, discussions, battle reports, and reviews to tabletop games like Malifaux. If you want to get better at the games you already play, or discover the games other people are playing, you are in the right place. Craig and Ray welcome you to the Third Floor and the Tabletop Talk broadcast.
Craig here on the Third Floor. Today we have 3 tabletop gamers that once loved playing Guildball from Steamforged Games. Now, listeners know that I'm a fan of Steamforged and Guildball. In fact, it was the game that made me realize I could play with miniatures and use a modern tight rule set that was balanced. Now, you know my first guest, Pete. He's one half of the Rage Quit Wire podcast. He's been on the show a few times now. Rage Quit Wire got started featuring a ton of Guildball content. So, Pete, welcome back to the Third Floor.
Glad to be back, Craig. It's always good to come up to the Third Floor and talk a little bit of nerding with you.
So, dude, you guys have been putting out some pretty strong Malifaux content lately.
Yeah, we got through a lot of the faction content, just like faction guides, because I think I was talking with you and a lot of guys about it, where I was like, there's just not one spot you can go to and say, hey, this is kind of what the guilds or the factions are like. Yep. So yeah, it's just something we started putting out. I got some people from the community and they turned out pretty good. And we're going to start cranking out probably some more how to work with your schemes and pools a little bit. So that's kind of our next step with Malifaux.
That's fantastic, man. So gaming wise, what have you been doing?
I've been bouncing around a little bit, as I do. I actually demoed Infinity, which I know Mike's going to be happy to talk about a little bit. And I also started playing a little Crisis Protocol because, the X-Men stuff came out and I love X-Men. So I've been bouncing around a little bit.
Nice. Very, very nice. So my second guest is Michael Klein. Now, he was a top Guildball player. He also used to have his own podcast devoted to Guildball. So, Michael, welcome to the Third Floor.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. Yeah. So I don't know who put top player. That must have been Pete.
It was.
He has rolled a die and moved a model is what it should say. Is that what you're
I did decently well when we were playing games in person and all of that. So
let's just say Mike is the Southern champion a couple times.
Now, that's the southern part of his town or the country?
No, I went down to Pete's neck of the woods and taught them how to play Guildball.
Very nice.
True.
So, Michael, there was a time where you knew nothing about rolling dice, knew nothing about miniatures, and then you've discovered them. So give me your story, man. How did you find tabletop miniatures?
Well, that time was probably about when I was 11, 12 years old, I would say. Did the whole, Warhammer thing. Then I found out that I like, women and that thing, and that happened for high school for a while, then college, and I realized tabletop gaming wins out, and started doing that again. I don't know, I played a bunch of games, everything from Games Workshop, played Infinity since it was a young game. Played Guildball when it, started becoming popular. I've bounced around a couple of other games as well. So,
but what was the gateway, Mike? So you said you started off with GW stuff?
Yeah. I mean, orcs and Necrons and Space Marines and stuff like that.
And how did you find it?
So I'm originally from New Jersey. There was a cool little game store called The Only Game in Town that wasn't too far away. And I think some friends invited me over and I saw cool little models and I thought I totally could do that. And then I found out later that I'm incredibly terrible at building and painting models, but I do like playing them. So, that stuck around.
Very cool. Very cool. My last guest is Johnny Wetzika, also a top table player of Guildball. So Johnny, welcome to the third floor.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's cool being here.
Same question to you, Johnny. How did you discover tabletop gaming?
When I want to say like in third grade, neighbors got me into Magic cards, and then that led to the game store. And then from the game store, I saw the craft rolled Iyenden Boxster like Eldar for 40K. And I was like, holy crap, those are so cool. I need to get them. And then got those as a birthday gift, assembled them, horribly painted them because I was 12. And then, from there, kind of moved on. And there's the dogs. Thanks, Mike.
Sorry, that is a signature of all my podcasting is that my dogs are in the background.
Absolutely. So then from there, kind of evolved to other games. Started playing like Fantasy Battle from there. Then eventually War Machine. And then from War Machine, played Guildball. After like the Oz Machine podcast, like talked about that briefly. And they kind of went to that, and then I got hooked, and then just started playing more Guildball, and then that eventually took over.
Very, very cool. So, guys, the four of us are going to kind of do a walk down memory lane. We're going to talk about the rise and fall of Guildball. We're going to talk about where Guildball started, how each of us found Guildball, started playing Guildball, talk about really Guildball at its height, what Guildball did right, and then we'll talk about kind of what happened since then, how the game kind of stalled and then eventually was shut down by Steamforged. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back from this break, we're going to talk about why we fell in love with Guildball. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm James Hahn, and I'm a patron of Third Floor Wars because I'm a henchman who loses most of his games, and the podcast has tons of valuable information to improve your play as well as what to expect from other crews. You can support them too. The link is in the show notes, or just search for Third Floor Wars on patreon.com.
What is it worth to you to get this podcast on a weekly basis? Is it worth $1 a month? $5 a month? $20 a month? If you'd like to help support the work that we're doing here on Third Floor Wars, please go by our Patreon. We're at patreon.com/thirdfloorwars. There you can pledge at any level, any dollar amount. Whatever you give us will help us put out quality content on a regular basis and hopefully make tabletop gaming a little bit better for you every week. Time to give a shout out to our newest patrons. A big special thanks goes to James Kahn, Rage Quit Wire, Deck Roll, Eloy, Robo Rotten, Jacob Suderman, Joshua Hatch, Donald Kroger, John Fox, and David Gadea. Because of you and the 100 plus that are supporting us on Patreon, we're able to put out regular content on a weekly basis. We appreciate it. So you guys that have been listening for a while have heard me talk about Guildball before, and how to this day I consider it probably one of the tightest rule sets I've ever come across. And there's no point going over my story of how I found Guildball. I've told it more than a few times. But I'd be curious for you, Mike. So it sounds like, you've been playing GW games and maybe now did you start Infinity before Guildball? What was first?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so Infinity was probably let's see, it's 2020. We're looking at over 10, 11 years ago, I think. Infinity was probably right around that college time. I was like playing GW games, started playing Infinity, did that for quite a few years, and then started switching over to Guildball right around the beginning. I think it was basically the release of season 2, right. More or less. I remember the starting of releasing some veteran players and some additional captains after the Kickstarter So yeah, jumped into it there. I think I had gotten a demo from some people who definitely kickstarted it back in New York, where I was at the time, because I remember them trying to get me to kickstart it, and I was like, "This is a great game, and I'll buy it, but I'm not going to kickstart." But that's just because I hate Kickstarter. But yeah, so I started around then.
So, what was the initial attraction then, Mike? What made you go, I think I want to look into this, and maybe even got you to even buy into it?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you say about the tight rule set. Like, I started off, playing it, and I was like, wow, this actually, like, it goes together. It makes sense. The rules seemed pretty tight, and they obviously got even tighter after that point.
Yep.
But that combined with the fact that it was just like, it was an interesting change, because I mean, other than Blood Bowl, you didn't have a ton of really popular it's a fighting game, but not like traditional fighting, two armies lining up and hitting each other, and that kind of sports aspect was really interesting to me from like an aesthetics point of view. So
yeah, it definitely had a different feel to it, right? I mean, I remember when the Kickstarter, for me, what sold me on it, and it's funny because the game I kickstarted was not the game I ended up getting, and that's my fault, not Steamforged. Like, in my mind, I thought it was going to be like soccer through the town square with a ton of terrain and stuff like that, and it ended up not really being a game with a ton of terrain. There was terrain and stuff there, but I ended up liking the game anyway. How about you, Johnny? What was kind of when did it get on your radar, and what made you say, you know what, I think I want to invest in this game?
So for me, I think like when I finally got like a demo and stuff, like, I guess it was more, actually, never mind. So it was more so like the miniatures, like really drew me to it. And then also like the rule set was super tight. It was basically like chess with dice is kind of what it felt like. And for me, I was like a big chess player through like high school and stuff, played like varsity chess. So that was like a bigger draw even from like War Machine and from like just big armies like fighting and everything. So from there, like, it like just kind of pulled me in and like made me want to play it more and more, and then like I got like some locals involved, and then that's kind of how I started playing more, because otherwise like I'm pretty much in like my own little basement meta by myself. So yeah, I was pretty much getting the other basement people in. So
Mike mentioned the theme was a factor, the fact that it looked and felt different. It wasn't just two armies in a pitched battle that attracted him. Did the theme matter at all to you?
Yeah, I think it, like, for me, like, I like the soccer theme and everything too. It was like kind of like a fun take on a miniature game, because there really hadn't been anything else that was like sports related other than like Blood Bowl, and Blood Bowl's very Games Workshop-y with like 1d6 determines your entire fate on everything, and that was just a little too binary for me. Yeah, I wasn't a fan. But yeah, Guildball like very much rewarded your decisions, and it was like the thinking man's kind of game, and that was definitely for me. So.
Very cool. How about you, Pete? Now, you came in a little bit later than these guys. When did it get on your radar?
So I was actually playing a lot of War Machine and Hordes, and I was actually the press ganger, and they were going through an edition change. So I remember when I was really kind of getting the group going, and it was getting pretty big in our area for War Machine, there was a couple guys in our meta that picked up this little soccer game, and I was like, you guys are idiots. I'm like, what? I'm like, you're wasting your time on this game. It's like War Machine, War Machine, War Machine. But after the edition change, a lot of the changes for War Machine I wasn't a fan of, and then they cut the press ganger program, so I was a little salty after that. Anybody that knows me knows kind of like, when you screw me over, I don't want to be a part of your thing anymore. So I started going to a new shop that just opened up, and my buddy Chris on the podcast was like, hey dude, I used to play this game, it's Guildball, and just check it out. So I got a demo from him, and I still remember he had a couple of guilds lined up, and I picked the Morticians because they were kind of like the goth, spooky kids, and I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. And then we started getting into it, and it was one of those games where it was simple to learn. After the first turn, you could pretty much play a whole game, but there was so many little intricacies that made it really interesting. Yeah. And then once I figured out that Steamforged Games wasn't trying to screw you out of money, because they were like, hey, here's all the rules, cards, and fluff online. It's all free. Enjoy. I was like, man, this is a little different. This is a type of game that, I haven't been used to playing. I've been used to companies like, Games Workshop and Privateer Press that screw you out of every little dime they can take out of you.
Yeah, it's easy to forget how ahead of the curve Steamforged was as far as putting that stuff out there, and partially because now it's almost a standard, right? Now companies are like, "What the hell? Why aren't you putting it out there now?" But it's easy to forget that Steamforged was ahead of the game. Now, for you, Johnny, was there a period of time where all you did was think, live, and breathe and play Guildball?
Yeah, there was with I think going from season 2 to 3 was kind of when I went full all in, because I was a big War Machine player as well and everything. It was still pretty much Guildball was a side game at that point. And then once season 3 happened, I was well, this game's just infinitely better to War Machine, especially Mark III War Machine was pretty poopy and sad. So I was nope, I'm out of here. And then all in on Guildball from there. So.
And now with War Machine, did you play War Machine competitively?
I did, yeah. I played that competitively from, I want to say 2010 until, I want to say 2014 or actually 15, 16, I guess. So.
And how did you feel about the competitive scene with Guildball?
Guildball, I thought it was the game was designed for the competitive player is what it felt like, because all the tournaments and everything it was structured so well. The game just ran so tightly and everything. There weren't many role questions, and if there was pretty clear cuts decisions for those, and there was never any gray area and rules lawyering with compared to War Machine, where it's pretty tight for the most part, but even so there's still a lot of loose space.
Yeah, the fact that the rule book was so small. I think the rule book was a total of 50 pages maybe, and that included flow charts and stuff. Whereas
and the fluff and stuff in it too.
Yeah. Whereas if you came from Games Workshop or Privateer Press, I mean, it might take you 30 minutes to actually find the rule that you need to figure out.
Pete, you mean if you came from Infinity, it took you 30 minutes
after you found the line of sight and see if you have cover or not, right?
After you determined if the translation from Spanish to English was correct or not.
But Mike, you and Pete are better people than I am. I have tried to play Infinity. I've tried, and it's just too much for me. But now let's go back to Guildball. So how about for you, Mike? I know you. I mean, you had a podcast about Guildball. I mean, how much time, months, years did you spend where Guildball was your game?
Yeah, a good number. I'm trying to think exactly when it started, but I had done some Infinity podcasts, and then we got into Guildball. The local scene was decent, but New York's always a weird place for miniature games. So I started doing a bunch of traveling, and at the time, the Philadelphia guys were very active, and that meta was very active. So I started doing some traveling, and I think. After a couple of tournaments with them, it started, I was hooked into the game. I think there was a good, maybe 4 or 5 years we're talking about roughly. Wow. In the realm of where, it was pretty serious doing the podcast, although I never took that seriously. I went to Poland, to play Guildball internationally. So, the first time I had ever done that, even for Infinity, which I had been, I'd say, pretty competitively in. So Guildball had a lot. I was definitely pretty bought in.
So what was it? What was Guildball giving you that Infinity wasn't? How did it win out for that period of time?
I'd say actually probably nothing specific. Both games are really good. They had different. I think the communities are a little bit different. So when I jumped into Guildball, there also wasn't there was a Infinity community in New York, but similar to Guildball. Again, we always had to travel. And then I think what I found was just the ease of traveling and doing tournaments for Guildball was a lot simpler. And then, I think
why? What made it simpler?
I mean, there's barely any terrain compared to Infinity, where you basically have
literally traveling was easier.
Yeah. Literally traveling. And I think one of the big things, I was still playing Infinity, but I used to go to Gen Con for Infinity tournaments, went 1 or 2 years. And then I think the third year I went to Gen Con, I did both Infinity and Guildball, and met the Chicago guys, and got to play at the time it was the Guildball. I think they called it the national championship. They didn't really have the same exact structure, but the ease of being able to travel and play Guildball, and the community was really great. So it was, again, different community than Infinity. Both are really good, but that community was really cool. So I dove in.
How about for you, Pete? Did you find that the community was different than the War Machine community?
Ooh, man, I tell you, the community, it would be different because Guildball, and eventually people would argue, and we might get to this going towards the end of Guildball, but it was a really unique game because you had a really clean set for tournaments, which made it really competitive. But when Steamforged was into season 2 and 3, they did some major campaigning for the casual player and the metas. And I remember about 6 months into it, they did the Unions in Chains event. And that was an event where literally you logged games on their website, and determining how many logged games there were for each guild, that would determine what new model was released for the winning guild. They paired off 2 different guilds, and one of those guilds was going to get a new model. And I just remember playing in that and just seeing the tournament scene. I mean, some of the tournaments were, you could go to a 40-man tournament for Guildball easily, pretty much.
Wow.
Almost anywhere in the United States, I would argue, especially in the Northeast, Chicago, the Southeast. We started getting really big in it too. Bill up in Virginia always had these huge Guildball tournaments every year, and it was just something that I hadn't seen with a mini game. I hadn't seen that much devotion and dedication, and that many people willing to play it at a high level. But even though I could play Mike, and Mike would trounce me in a game, right? Mike and I would still have a really great time playing that, because there's still, even when you're losing, there's still some really interesting moments that can happen. Mike would argue that maybe I shouldn't counterattack at a certain moment in a game because the math's not there, and that's more Mike's style than mine. But when I do counterattack and I get this amazing result and I slam his model, 4 inches away, those moments are awesome. And it doesn't matter if I'm getting my butt kicked. It's still really fun to play. And I think that's what Guildball did an excellent job capturing.
So I'd be curious.
Those moments. Oh, go ahead.
No, Mike, go.
I was going to say those moments were awesome, but they also mostly existed in Pete's head.
Right here. And in my heart.
He was like, it's totally going to happen. It's totally going to happen. This time it's going to happen.
I'm an optimist.
Pete's favorite phrase. Imagine if that worked.
It did. 1% of the time.
So I'd be curious, Johnny, when you kind of look. No, well, first of all, Johnny, for you, do you still play Guildball?
I do, yeah. I'm playing pretty regularly. Vassal has been a huge advent. I'm currently the games leader in Vassal.
Look at you.
And or just in Guildball in general. I think I have 160 log tournament games at the moment, because Vassal's really cool and neat. So yeah, getting to play with everyone around the world and stuff. The community is still going pretty strong. So.
Well, so do you anticipate that as long as there's other people playing, that your love of the game won't stop, even though it's been shelved by Steamforged?
For sure, yeah. I know there's a lot of other games that still live on even to this day after they've been canceled, years after whatever. That happened with Blood Bowl.
Yeah.
And they were able to revive and everything. So yeah, I definitely think I'm gonna keep playing as long as there's tournaments and stuff where I can play and stay sharp with it. I definitely love the game and want to keep going. So
that's cool. How about you, Mike? Are you still playing?
I have rejoined the first tournament in a couple months, but I was similar to Johnny. I was playing a bunch of Vassal games for a while. I think. So I'm over in New Mexico now. I'm actually in one of the big centers for Infinity. So my locals, when I've gotten the chance to play in person, which isn't that often, has been more Infinity and board games and stuff like that, which has driven me a little bit away from grinding grinding online games for Guildball. But yeah, I'm playing in this tournament. I'll still always join in something or another for Guildball.
Yeah, there's several dead games out there. There's still people that play 8th edition Warhammer. I know it's got what do they call it? 9th edition, I think they call it now. And to Johnny's point, Blood Bowl, hell, the community kept that alive and thriving before Games Workshop realized that it was sitting there as a gold mine they just left unfurrowed. How about you, Pete? Do you anticipate you'll pull out the models again or hop on Vassal again?
I am the scorned lover of Steamforged games, and they are lucky that I'm still playing God Tier.
We'll probably cover that a little bit more in the next segment, but no, you and you moved on. I remember when you first reached out to me when you started showing an interest in Malifaux. Was Malifaux the game that was that your first girlfriend after the divorce?
No, I had other girlfriends, but Malifaux is kind of where I settled.
Okay. So Mike, when you look back on kind of the heyday, right, when Guildball was the game, and there's arguably a good period of time where I think it was the premier competitive game, and as far as miniatures go, what do you look back on fondly? What do you think? Why was that working so well, and why did Steamforged really get the game in such a good place?
Okay, so two different things. I mean, I think the reason they established themselves so well was how connected they were as like a development team to their competitive player base, the interactions they were able to do, the way they were able to interact over social media. We'll probably speak to it more, but there was is still a very popular Discord server, and I think that was really great because other than like that was it's like a very immediate, because it's a chat-based, conversation rather than like a Facebook group or something like that. So, I think Steamforge's involvement with that and with their player base and running the tournaments and doing the different, kind of incentives and things they did was why the game was so successful competitively. In addition to the fact that, again, very easy to run, games are relatively short, time limited. Well, very much time limited. Don't need a lot of terrain, stuff like that. But what do I look back on fondly is kind of a different thing. I'd say for me, I mean, all the big tournaments, hanging out with the guys, like hanging out and drinking with Pete or with Johnny or with anything. But I'd say the biggest one, if I had to pick one, going to Poland and doing the World Team Championship, which was, traditionally a War Machine event, but they did add Guildball to it, and we did, it was the second year. I wasn't able to go the first year. I wasn't able to get off of work enough time, but the second year I went, and just being able to drink schnapps with the Slovenians and get blackout drunk with the Germans, and I mean a lot of it involved drinking, as you could tell. Watch Bryce, the one of the developers, not the lead developer at the time, try to vault the couch and land face first and split his lip open, bleeding out all over a Polish hotel room. All those like side things that all those side experiences that go along with miniature gaming that make it so much of a great social experience, have always been my best memories.
Now it's funny, when I had Bryce on the show, he did not mention that incident in the Polish hotel room.
He forgot.
He doesn't remember that incident for sure.
Oh, that's funny. How about you, Johnny? Is there some highlights when you think about the heyday?
Yeah, I definitely so I went to WC the following year from Mike or whatever. And I'd say that's probably what was the highlight of Guildball career. So WTC is such a blast, and you're drink and hang out with everyone and just shoot the shit, just meeting all of the international players and stuff. It's just that community is just so cool, and definitely the best part of it. Also spilling a beer all over Owen Bell's miniatures and stuff in his bag after I offered him one. That was pretty great.
That's funny. How was Pete? You being a broadcaster. I'm not going to ask Mike because he had his own podcast, so he's a biased source. But for you, Pete, well, I guess you did too. So I'm going to ask Johnny this question. Never mind, Johnny.
I had a podcast too for
Johnny was on a podcast as well.
God, man, oh man, I can't pick a guest. All right, so now I got to ask all three of you the same question. What role did content creators take, and how Steamforged interacted with content creators?
Yeah, this was interesting because, and this is the first time I saw this in a miniature game, and like Mike said, the developers and the people in the company were so accessible that pretty much anybody, even, me or Mike or Johnny could start a podcast literally from, nowhere. And Steamforged was like, hey, I hear you're doing a podcast. Here's some, information so you can, release content out day of, release. Here's some spoilers. Why don't we come on and talk on your podcast? And they even did something really cool where they got a bunch of the podcasts when they were going to their new season. And they were like, hey, let us know what guild you want to reveal for the new season. And we'll hook you up with all the new cards and even the minor, if they have a minor guild out. So that was like, holy crap. There's gaming companies that they won't even talk to you if you tell them you have a podcast and you want to talk to them. It's just, to me, it was so amazing that they were willing to open up to the community like that.
Yeah, that's huge. And Johnny, did you find that there was just a vibrant content creating community? I mean, was there a lot of really good podcasts in there, or was there a couple good ones and then there was Mike's and Pete's?
No, I thought like all the podcasts were like pretty fantastic overall. Yeah, but no, yeah, like I felt like every podcast kind of had like its own like niche and was like kind of like brought its own unique take to the game, which was really cool. And like just like the ability of a game to create like that much content and like that much diversity in like podcasts was, I think, like just a hallmark and like one of like the true like, I guess, strengths of the game, where like you had that much like ability to like talk about it. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the cool things was, we all three of us had podcasts. There was the Chicago podcast, which was one of the more popular ones. There was an Australian podcast. There were a couple of UK podcasts, with one being particularly, I guess two really being particularly the most long running and prolific. That's true. We had Guildball tonight before that. Yeah. But what I was going to say was, it was such a close-knit community that, the Chicago guys would put out a podcast. I'd argue with them on Discord, and then I'd record an episode and I'd argue with them on my podcast. And then we would, talk back and forth to each other. And there was so much interaction. There was definitely crossover episodes, that we did between the various we were all friends. And it was such a close community that even the Australian guys, although I'll never let him live it. One of the Australian hosts went to New York to run the New York City Marathon. And I actually came out and, went to cheer him on. Of course, he snubbed me by missing me, in the crowd, and I never let him. I never let him live it down. But that's how close it was. I felt like going out and meeting up with a podcaster from literally across the world. Just because we had these cool conversations.
Well, I've always found that the amount and the quality of content being created for a game is a good measure of the game, right? And the health of it. And really where the community can be. So that really doesn't surprise me. I never played Guildball competitively. It was always a casual game for me, and I enjoyed it. And but that was one of the things I noticed. And it was really kind of because with GW games, I never listened to any podcasts about GW games. Didn't give a crap about what anybody else thought on that stuff. But with Guildball, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed listening to that, even though I was not a competitive guy with it. So guys, let's take a quick break. What I want to talk about when we get back from this break is I want to talk about when things started to show us signs of problems. So when did we first start reading the tea leaves and recognizing that there might be an issue? We'll be right back.
If you're an athlete, the greatest motivator of all is the fear of letting your teammates down. After all, a team is only as good as its weakest link. So you owe it to those wearing the same jersey as you to be your best every time you step on the field. That's why there's no vape in team. When you vape, you can expose your lungs to toxic chemicals that can damage your lungs. If you're a step behind, the team's a step behind. Brought to you by The Real Cost and the FDA.
Howdy friends, Craig here. Nothing makes Malifaux easier than having the right tools. Here at the third floor, we love all the licensed Malifaux goodies from Custom Meeple. Not only are they helping support this podcast, they sell custom-made weird licensed tokens and terrain. They sell it all. Crew boxes, terrain, markers, tokens, and even a 3x3 full Malifaux board. Custom Meeple sells a complete M3E token set covering every marker and token you need to play. Custom Meeple are the source for the official accessories for Malifaux. Everything is designed by hand and authorized by Weird Games. Check them out at custommeeple.com, that's with one M, or follow the link in the show notes. up your Malifaux game and be sure to tell them Craig from the Third Floor sent you. If you use the promo code Third Floor Friend, all one word, THIRDFLOORFRIEND, you'll get a 5% discount and help support the podcast. It's valid on everything except retail products and playmats. So the game is doing well. It's got this huge community. We've got podcasts left and right. People are going to watch other podcasters run in a circle. Everything's going really, really well. Pete, for you, was there any indication that there might be a problem?
Yeah, there's a few things that kind of started opening my eyes to, like, okay, these are some like kind of warning signs. But what ended up happening, the things that stood out to me, is there was a release. This was in season 3, and there was a release of, they used to sell their models in blisters. So they didn't quite have team boxes yet. So you had to buy them individually. And they put out a new release for these different players that came out. And I remember one was Locust from the Engineers, and there was like Vet Siren and some other models that came out. And I just remember there was a lot of problems getting those to some places. And, you know, the first time that happened, everybody was like, well, you got to give Steamforged a pass. You know, they're a small company, you know, they're gamers, they're, you know, doing this for us. And, you know, so everybody kind of started giving them a pass. And then we started getting into what was kind of known as the Thresh-pocalypse. We started having some balancing issues when the Farmers Guild came out. So this is a brand new guild, and it was a really busted guild. They could do some really powerful things. They made, you know, not good players look good like myself. So that was something that, you know, was kind of glaring. And then there were there were more issues that started popping up, like the new minor guilds came out, but they had problems releasing them again. And the funny one was that the Navigators minor guild actually got sunk coming over to all the distribution places. So they actually lost it at sea. And then the Butchers minor guild, the chefs, or the cooks, sorry, they, I mean, it took forever for them to come out. By the time they came out, they were balanced for season 3, but they didn't come out till season 4. And by that time, people were really getting egregiously upset with Steamforged. They were voicing, you know, like, you know, you're promising all this stuff, you're giving us dates, and here it is, you know, 6 months later, that type of stuff. So a lot of it was production issues, and then it ended up becoming balancing issues. And I think that was the balancing issues really started popping up when you started seeing the other captains that came out, and you saw some of the other like minor guilds, like the minor guild was a really powerful guild when it came out. So it seemed like there was a lot of balancing issues. They weren't play testing stuff as much out the door. And I don't know if it was becoming hard for them to balance, but that in combination with the production quality and the production issues they had with getting it into the stores, it really was starting to cause a lot of problems in the community, and people were starting to get pissed off about it.
Was that really for you too, Johnny, when you started to go, man, something's going on here?
Yeah, all the production issues were like really a big problem. Like, yeah, it really sucked because I want to get people money into the game and stuff. Yeah, I want to give you guys money. Please let me help me spend money. I want to throw this at you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that like really sucked. Another big thing too was the press gang, or not the press gangs, like the pundit program. Once that, like, because they like kind of cut that off like pretty abruptly. But I think like part of that was also like the big lawsuit with like Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, that's why everybody had to do it. But yeah.
Yeah, but like with like the loss of like that, it really seems like they like dropped the foot then like on any sort of like community like support and outreach. And then they kind of like did the same with like the podcast too and everything. They started like easing back from them.
Well, Johnny, I think Johnny, you were going to say something even more kind of hitting to me when you were going to talk about new players, right? You were about to say,
right? Yeah, yep. Yeah, that was like one of the big like production things, because like you demo this game, you're like, hell yeah, this game is so sweet, and you can only buy farmers and blacksmiths. Hope you like those, and if not, you're kind of screwed. So yeah, so that was like a big thing too. And then like now the game, like with like near the end or whatever, they like finally figured out their production stuff, but it was too little too late. So
now, did you find there to be the balance issues that Pete talked about?
There definitely were like some of like I think like the farmers, like the Threshpocalypse as it's been called, definitely was an issue. Everything else seemed like for the most part okay. There's like some things were like a little scooch too powerful, I guess, but I don't think anything like other than like Thresher like release was too bananas.
Right. And was there any kind of sense from Steamforged on what the hell was going on? So Pete senses this change. Johnny, you sense a change. Was Steamforged somewhat transparent about the production issues, or was Steamforged saying, "Good, yeah, well, yeah"? What did we see change with the company? Anything, Mike?
Yeah, so I mean, I 100%. I didn't. There were balance issues. I don't know if they were necessarily signs. I think they're signs of a just normal development process in the game. But the production issues were huge. I remember at one point demoing the game to somebody, and they wanted Union, and this was right at the point where they kind of discontinued a lot of their metal models, and it was just couldn't buy it. And this guy worked for a game store, so it was at 0 of their 3 major, distributors. And it took, 8 months, and he actually ended up buying the guild, way after there was any point to, keep playing. But yeah, I'd say there was almost a full year. It was close to that. It was somewhere in the range of like 8 months to a year, where it was almost impossible to buy models for the game, other than the, 1 to 2 sets that they really had. Had out. So that was a big issue. And then I think what we saw, this was always something we kind of joked about in the community, but Steamforge's approach to, while their early community engagement, they had some really great things. They would do this thing where they like had great community engagement and great programs and great things. And then they would just drop off the face of the earth. Not like that the developers were still very much in contact with the community, but they would just mess up on simple PR and just like general marketing kind of things, where it's like they had a marketing team, and Guildball was their main game at the time. This was before they really jumped into all their Kickstarters like 100%, and I cannot think of like there were times where it'd go like 2 months without a social media post whatsoever, anything. It was always just like, yep, production issues are here and we're working on them, and like we're gonna fix them, and we have these great ideas, but they were always so vague. And then so that would happen for several months, and then like there would be a little bit of an uproar, and then we'd get a flurry of things from their their community engagement, and it would be like, oh, this is great, this is awesome, and then that would drop off again, and then the same cycle.
Yeah, and the one that really pissed me off was, so we ended up going to, I can't remember which SteamCon it was probably like 2018 or something like that, and it was in Nashville, great time, but they overspent. They picked what was it, the Opry or something. And it's like, why are you putting a bunch of nerds in this like 5-star hotel just to be nerds for a weekend? I mean, the hotel rooms were like, I think we spent like $700 for the weekend for the room. So we had like 5 nerds crammed in a room, and they ended up losing a lot of money on it because they didn't sell out their room blocks and stuff. And it was ridiculous. But the thing, and Mike, you can talk about the SteamCon problems after, but the one that pissed me off is they didn't give any word of the next SteamCon, and they're like, well, we'll have some news coming, and then eventually they end up releasing this post saying like, hey, sorry, there's no SteamCon, and there's not going to be any world champ. I don't remember is the world championship, but they basically canceled their whole like dedication to the competitive like tournament scene that they had built themselves upon, and it was very disappointing. But yeah, SteamCon was a train wreck after that year for sure.
So the one thing I'm trying to figure out, and maybe we don't know the answer to this, is what was happening behind the scenes. Do we have a sense of what? I mean, we see what happened outside. What was happening inside? Did we ever find out, or do we know?
I think we have a pretty good idea. Johnny, I want to hear your thoughts on this as well, especially since we've been chatting for a bit. But my sense is this, at this time is probably when the creators, Matt and Rich, were really exploring their IP licensing. We don't know that for sure, but that's like around the time, it started before they did that stuff, and it went through like Dark Souls, and it went through, some of those things. And you could tell, even though the developers were still super into the engagement and doing stuff for the game, I cannot imagine that they were not really focusing their efforts on obtaining licensing for those IPs and figuring out how to make those things.
Well, guys, they also screwed up the Kickstarter for Dark Souls.
well, yeah, but I mean,
yeah, I think that was beyond their control a little bit, just because that was like they weren't expecting that level of engagement in terms of like buying it and everything. Because like, what was it? Like they're expecting what, like maybe $100,000 or some shit like that, and it ended up being a couple $1 million in terms of like scale and difference. So I don't fault them entirely on that. I enjoy that game, I guess, but I'm a weirdo. Maybe. I mean, I don't know.
Do we get a sense that they just were biting off more than they could chew?
With that, I think so. Yeah, they definitely like overcommitted in terms of what they're expecting.
They saw I wouldn't call it easy money, but they saw when you get an IP license that already has a ton of people devoted to that game, it's way more, I guess, not free money, but easy money. Like you don't have to put as much press into it and say like, hey, here's a new game. You already have millions of fans that love Dark Souls and love all the other games that they're Devil May Cry and the other ones that they put out.
And Pac-Man.
Pac-Man card game.
Yeah, I mean, without like going into too much stuff that might get me in trouble for like knowing more than I should about some of the company's workings, I can tell you the amount of man hours they were, dedicating to Guildball. Like the work that was being put out by their development team was great, considering how little time I can tell. And just game developers don't make a ton of money. I got a good insight into that, and like the work that was being put out for what I could say is like significantly less than what I make in the field of education, and that's not a high paying field. So like they weren't.
People like Jamie got moved to other projects. Like they had some of their best developers not working on Guildball.
Yeah, you could tell the resources were very minimal that that we're getting, and they were still putting out some good stuff with what they had, but obviously the kind of like structure of the company's support for it, you could tell was less. I
do want to give a shout out here to people like Sherwin Matthews, because his writing in the world of Guildball was always amazing, and no matter what they gave him, he was able to write some amazing work out of it. So I know we're starting to get to the point where we're bashing a little bit, but even during this time, Sherwin was doing some really good work.
Well, and to be clear, Pete, I don't think we are bashing, and maybe I'm reading you guys wrong.
Criticizing.
It sounds like you're lamenting more than anything, where you're saying, hey, this kind of sucked. And
I'm still hurt.
It's not that Steamforged was a bunch of bad people and they turned evil and got little curly mustaches. It sounds like, that things got stretched. And, they're a small company. They were, and they still are. You suddenly put out something like Dark Souls and you have to produce, 700,000 copies or something ridiculous, I think that they had. But that was it. Now, I'm a huge fan of Dark Souls because I pledged it. I think 7 years later, I finally got it and sold it for 3 times what I paid for it. Literally the day it arrived, I kept it in the box, posted it on eBay, and 3 days later sold it for 3 times what I paid. So I'm a big fan of that game, which I never played. But no, I mean, yeah, but it is being critical. And one point that Mike makes, which is a really big point, is and I get a little bit angry with people that give developers shit. These guys are not making a lot of money, and it is for you to be a game developer and to do that full time, you're doing it because you freaking love making games, because you're definitely not doing it to get rich. And you're definitely not doing it because it's easy hours. And you're definitely not doing it because people are going to support you online and tell you how great you are.
Yeah, I feel like, Craig, though, kind of like what you're saying, the community did a really good job protecting those developers and protecting the people of Steamforged. It was kind of more anger starting to go towards the top and distribution. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I think I would amend our thing, Craig. You'll see by the end of this, we might bash Steamforged as a company, but we will definitely not bash Steamforged employees at the development level, at Sherwin's level, whatever you want to call it. I guess that's fluff development. But yeah, those people, like beautiful, like love them. I would invite Bryce over if he wasn't across the ocean and have a beer with him any day.
Yeah.
Same thing for Jamie. All those guys. those are the ones I know. Dom, who joined later, was also really great. But yeah, so less that and more maybe the corporate decisions that were starting to be made.
It also helps that Bryce and Jamie are just good dudes, right? And smart dudes that are good at what they do. Johnny, did you get a sense during all of this? We talked about how the engagement with the content creators was a big deal, how when a vibrant, a large amount of quality content was coming out. Did you get a sense, Johnny, when there was a turn in the broadcasts where you started hearing things get sour and it was being broadcast across different podcasts? Did you get a sense of that happening as a listener?
I think it was just less podcasts, honestly.
Interesting.
Just because there's less stuff coming out, less stuff to listen to, because there's not as much development and talk with with the community, and that leads to less content because there's less stuff to talk about, And I feel like that was kind of across the board, across all the podcasts.
Yep.
So.
That'll definitely be a big factor. So, guys, we're going to take another break. When we get back from this break, we're going to talk about The End, capital T, capital E. We're going to talk about, probably kick it off talking about that controversial post they made. So we'll be right back. Howdy, friends. Craig here. You deserve a new playmat. Here on the third floor, we use Mats by Mars. They are scratch resistant, waterproof, wet erase marker compatible, almost free of glare, and lighter than neoprene. Mats by Mars gives you over 40 designs to choose from. You pick a mat, pick a design, and then you pick an overlay, like one for Marvel Crisis Protocol, Star Wars Legion, or even Malifaux 3rd Edition. Those overlays will really speed up your deployment and make the placement of objective markers so easy. Use our promotion code in the show notes to get a 10% discount on your first order. In the notes of your order, you can even request the third floor logo on your mat for free. That makes the best mat in the business even a little better. So get some new mats, save yourself some money, and help support the show. Go to matsbymars.com. All the details are in the show notes, including the discount code. So I was well out of Guildball by the time this happened, and this is how long ago, Pete, was it when they put this out?
What was it, guys? August?
August, end of the summer, right? Yep. So it wasn't that long ago. And basically, Steamforged put out a message saying, "That's it, we're done. We're not putting out anything more for it, and it's dead and gone." But before we jump into that, I do want to talk about what was happening right before that. So before The End, Mike, can you talk to us about what was happening? There was a lot of stuff happening on Twitter and some play testing that was happening and all kinds of stuff. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I don't know how much. I mean, I think there were a couple of the UK guys that were really into the playtesting. So yeah, what ended up happening broadly was obviously, people knew there was something going on. There hadn't been really any releases. Things were getting, there was a lot of radio silence. I mean, we're still playing the game pretty well, but with COVID and everything, obviously that was transitioning to online. So we get these kind of random Twitter posts from Matt Hart, the creative director or whatever his title is, being kind of like, let me shoot some ideas for how to radically change the rules of Guildball. Because that was his inspiration, that the rules needed some kind of major overhaul and redesign. And started putting out ideas there and saying that there was going to be some play testing. To this day, as far as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I don't think the feedback form ever came. And if it did, it was obviously way past any decision point for them keeping the game. So yeah, it was really weird. And now looking back at it, it seems completely disingenuous in terms of maybe he was wanted to have some ideas, but I don't know how, as the, whatever level person of the company, he didn't know that the game was already dead at that point. They weren't producing anything. So you're going to do a field test to change, or a play test to change all your rules up when you're not producing new products for this game anymore. So I don't know. I was confused by it, so I never really paid it much attention.
Did you get a sense of what was going on with that, Johnny?
I mean, yeah, it was kind of like in hindsight or whatever. It's kind of a dick move, honestly. I don't know. Like, yeah, because like it really wasn't going to change anything. All of like the changes were very like, I mean, they're radical or whatever, which is like cool to like kind of like rethink the game. But I don't know. It just seemed like it failed across like the community. No one was like really interested in that. They wanted kind of more of the same and like just actual releases, like miniatures and like new rules would have been cool for like new stuff instead of like trying to overhaul everything, especially with like season 4 being like relatively new, especially with like COVID kind of like throwing a wrench in that and everything and like kind of like disrupting that. The game still felt like pretty new, pretty fresh. There's still a lot of like unexplored territory in like
and
season
being
4
like
even at that point.
Johnny, I don't know if you agree, but being like the best balanced the game has been. It was probably in the best state. Yeah, best state. The game was probably rule-wise in the best state it had ever been in.
Right now I think it's like the tightest like rule set that it's ever had, and I think like everything is pretty damn close right now, like in current. So yeah, it's kind of baffling.
Yeah, it was crazy because I remember that so this would have been September 2019. It was radio silence for a lot of the podcasts too. There wasn't a lot of content being put out. I remember it going months without other content creators putting stuff out. And Chris and I on our podcast would put stuff out when there was something to talk about. But even canceling off a lot of the tournaments were small. Spring Fling, one of the biggest tournaments in the United States, didn't even sell tickets to put it on. So Bill had to cancel Spring Fling pre-COVID. Even though it wouldn't have been able to happen because of COVID. But still, that was another red flag. When you contacted anybody from the media team, they wouldn't get back to you. And that was the point when I would reach out to them and I got no response. That's when I started looking at different games. And that's actually how I ended up going to Malifaux, because I was just like, you want to know what? Scorn lover here. I'm going to go to a game that's active. It's exciting right now. The new 3rd edition was going out for Malifaux. And I was kind of just waiting. And when that field test popped up, Chris and I did an episode and we talked about some of the ones we kind of liked. We talked about some changes we wanted to see. And we still had hope, though. And I think Gen Con was the big part that really pissed me off, because here you are with your flagship game and everybody was doing online Gen Con content. Craig, you were a big part of the one that we did. And basically, at the end of their spiel, somebody was like, hey, what about Guildball? You know, your flagship game. Their famous quote that I will stick with is, something is coming. Don't worry about it, guys. Something's coming. And then 3 weeks later, get the axe and the game's done.
Yeah, I did not see. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say the side story people may not, that was their public comment. They said something similar on their Discord with the, head of the company literally going on to the Guildball Discord and being like, oh, don't worry, guys. Like, we have some big news in a couple of weeks. Yeah, winky face. That was the famous. There was a winky face. If news is coming, and it was such a hype up. People got excited about it. I watched people being like, "Oh, great, they're gonna have a big thing." And then obviously he knew what the announcement was. It was, hey, your game's canceled.
Yeah, see, now that adds a bit of light to this, because like I said, I was out of the game, right? I wasn't following it. I wasn't on a Discord. Hadn't played Guildball in 2 years, and wasn't listening to podcasts about it or anything anymore. So that announcement drops, and I remember reading it, going, here was my take. Here was my read, right? Not knowing about the winky face. My read was, look, we've developed ourselves into a corner. The game is solved, and there really isn't much left to do. There isn't any place for us to flex without making drastic changes, and we don't want to make drastic changes. So we're just going to stop. And I remember reading it, again, not knowing this history, and I remember going, you know what? That's why I stopped playing your game, for that reason. And I thought it was pretty ballsy just to say, look, we're done, because there's nothing left to do. And then I saw the reaction. And just the vitriol and just the hate that came out. And I knew that I obviously had missed something. What was your reaction, Mike?
Good. I'm glad you went to me because I think Johnny and Pete should definitely speak to it, but I would have been straining at the leash. I hear what you're saying with, being out of the game and seeing that. And I think that totally could have been a possibility that could have happened with Guildball, because we did know there was some limitations with the way they designed the game. And just in terms of, a capitalist profitability, it was a game with not a ton of miniatures and kind of a hard set limit. But a couple of things. One, they didn't reach that limit. They never finished creating all their minor guilds. So even if you want to go through, if that would have been the complete game and they just didn't have a good way to expand it without ruining the product, they would have finished those things. So that didn't happen.
Right.
Two, if you look at it, they could have just said the game's not profitable, which we all knew because they weren't releasing models for it, and that's why it's over. We love the game. We're gonna, we'll support it in what way we can, but we're not producing models for it. We'll still keep stuff up on our website because that's not too much. They already have the website, and that would have been fine. We would have been sad, but good with it. But when it's like we're done with this game, it's over. And the reason it died, and that was the big part, that second part of that blog post that they did on their website, the reason it died is that, the players turned the game into something that we didn't want it to be, which is, honestly, I have to say, this will be my one big curse. It's bullshit. It was designed as a competitive game with really tight rules that was fun to play, good for new players, but like a lot of depth. To say that the game got people got too competitive about it. Come on, War Machine exists. Games Workshop exists, and that game has so much more. There's so much. Even Malifaux, my understanding of it is there's a lot more. There's a lot of people who take these games really seriously and competitively and look for combinations, and there's list building in these games, and there's a lot of ways to kind of break the game. Guildball was not anywhere near that. So that statement is completely disingenuous. That was in my mind, because the post was very clearly authored by the two head people, Matt and Rich. Well, at least the part that talks about that. There was a part, I think, from Jamie as well. But that part speaks to, we made a mistake in the way we planned this game out, the way we did our as a game company, but we don't want to admit that because we have all these IPs that are in the process, and we don't want to look like we failed something. So what happened? No, the players didn't do it, and that's what happened. And I think that's a complete cop out.
Here's my one on why this is bullshit. So previous year, they had one of the biggest community events they ever had. They said the numbers superseded anything else they've ever had in the community. And they want to say the competitive players ruined it. It's like, you have so many people that love the fluff and love the community. They love the campaigns. They love the big league that they put out, which they hadn't put out since season 2. So here we are, 2 seasons later, and they still haven't developed into the community a cool campaign system like they did for season 2. I had to go back and, kind of make up rules for the big league to do it in my meta. And we had 30 people in that big league, and they want to sit here and tell us the competitive players ruined it. Mike's terrible, but he's not that terrible, So the community is really strong in Guildball, and if they would have kept it going and put the resources into it, we talked about earlier how they started pulling resources out of Guildball because they wanted to get that money from those IPs and those, the bigger money makers, which is fine, but Guildball still had a place where they still could have made money out of it. They just didn't want to put the resources into it. And maybe I can understand that because it was COVID and they want to keep the, company afloat and they want to keep making money. But still, just say, hey, we're at a hiatus. We'll wait it out. Then we'll work towards a new season. I think it was really premature just to kill the game off. And it was kind of just really crappy the way they did it.
I will say the game was dead. The decision for the game being dead, maybe not its final, 100% confirmation, happened way before COVID. Yeah. I'm talking before COVID hit anywhere in the world, let alone, the UK or the US. That decision was made when they were still finishing up some real, like you said, that really successful community project. I think the decision was starting to be made around then.
So if that's true, Mike, then you really feel like Hart was pulling everybody's chain when he was doing that field test stuff on Twitter.
I mean, I think he has some connection to the game. I think one of the podcasts actually really talked about it well. There's like a psychological kind of a construct where, it's not my normal wheelhouse. So there is an official name for it, but it's like it's when you create something and then you become invested in it and it's your thing and now you know best about it. Even if you haven't been involved in it, you're not keeping up with it. You don't have that knowledge anymore. So I do think he probably honestly believed that he knew good things about the game and had a right sense of it. And it was going wrong because of these factors that were just not in line with whatever vision he had in his head. But I mean, he wasn't the one who was in the day-to-day of that game, as we know from all the great work that the developers put in. So I would imagine it just kind of became a clash of like, we had this vision, so yeah, we're convinced we know what happened, and maybe Matt really did believe that there was something like that. But I from a company standpoint, and I'm not a business guy, but there's no way that 3 months before you announce the end of your game and you've already stopped production of all your models, a rules change is going to be the thing that keeps that financially afloat for you. There's no way that decision was made that quickly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No way.
No, I mean, I think it's a reasonable thing to surmise. How about you, Johnny? What was your take?
So I was kind of offended, honestly, by them calling out the community and like telling us it's our fault the game failed. Really? Like, you don't think maybe killing all of the community support for the game, killing the production for the game, having all of these like myriad of problems, and you come and blame the community? Like, it's
so.
I don't know.
So I need your help here, Johnny. Before we came on, I went and tried to find the announcement. It's no longer on the Steamforged site. I have found snippets of the announcement, but I haven't found the complete thing. And it was a pretty lengthy post, and it had different authors, that had different comments on it. And understand again the premise here that I was not as in the game as you guys were, right? But I kept hearing that Steamforged is blaming the players. Steamforged is blaming the players. And I don't remember reading that. So help me out, Johnny. What did I miss when I read that? And then I kept hearing, well, they're blaming the players. I remember going back and going, where did they blame the players? Can you help me understand where that sentiment comes from?
So like in the post or whatever, like what happened was, I want to say that they said that like we tried our best to like make the game the best it could be, but the community like took over the game, changed it. They played it wrong. They did the wrong thing by being competitive with the game and by like playing it to its fullest and like kind of like almost not solving the game, but like maximizing the game and playing it in a way that they didn't envision was kind of how they like blamed the community with that. And then like they caused that, like they used that as like a lot of their like reasoning as to why the game was like dying and like getting killed off. So I guess that's like where the community like, because they like actively like say like the players did this thing or whatever, kind of like blaming them and like kind of calling them out, and that's I guess where like the issue has, and like everyone like the community is like very online, so like I think like a lot of us like we're all talking about it and stuff and just like so astonished that they would like do that, and I think that kind of like fed into that as well. But
I have a snippet. It's not the whole thing, but this is one of the pieces. I don't think this talks to everything, but I found an old Reddit post that had some quotes of some of the stuff from the announcement, even though the announcement itself is gone. Guildball became the type of game where you win your first game demo and then lose the next 100 games. When matched against a lesser skilled or inexperienced opponent, a better player would simply win the vast majority of their games. I mean, one, not really true. You wouldn't lose 100 games of Guildball after your demo. You certainly could win plenty of games. And also, like, to a second degree, like, I mean, most games have some kind of learning curve where if you're what did they say? When you're matched against a lesser skilled or inexperienced opponent, a better player would win a large majority of the games. That means it's a
better player should win. The better player should win.
Right.
Yes.
That's what I love about Malifaux, right? I mean, like, to me, that's a good thing. It's what I compliment Guildball on all the time. As I say, what was great about Guildball is your decisions mattered even though it had dice, the player that made the best decisions was going to win the game the majority of time.
Well, it's the funny thing about this is that it's a sports game, and I don't know if it's the mindset of society or whatever that everybody needs to get a trophy, but it's like, no, if you wanted to be good at Guildball, you needed to get your reps in, you needed to play the game smart, and then you want to know what? Sometimes, no matter how hard I tried, Mike would still kick my butt, and that's just how it works.
Well, and so here's what I'm going to throw out at you, and this is for all three of you. Had they phrased it differently, had they said something like, the game is awesome. The game rewards people that spend time learning the game. The game rewards the best high-skilled players. And inadvertently, it's made it tough for us to attract new players. As a result, we're having a tough time attracting new players, and the game isn't making us money anymore. And we're kind of in a tough spot. Would that have been a different way to say the same thing?
It would have been better, and I would have been more accepting of it, obviously. But then I would still call out the new player thing, because you can't get new players into the game when there's not product.
Right.
Literally, you had to go on Facebook, eBay, borrow it from a friend.
I gave models away to people just so they would have models to play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And did they acknowledge any of those problems in the announcement?
No, and I don't think they could.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing they couldn't do, right? Because that's the thing that tells your people who are investing, and they got a large investment from some sort of firm, not too long before. That's the kind of thing that says, like, we're not good at delivering on our product, and don't give us money, right? For these big, huge money blockbuster IPs, or at least partially blockbuster IPs. I mean, Dark Souls, definitely blockbuster. So I don't think, I think what they could have done, though, without acknowledging that, because I don't think they ever were, was going to say, you know what? We're not able to support the game in the way it needs to be successful. That, to me, would have been, boom, okay. They acknowledge they can't do what they need to do for the game to be successful. They're not saying they messed up, which they did, but that's fine. I didn't expect them to say that. But yeah, just leave it at that. Don't blame your players. Don't blame your game, which is really good. And we would have been sad, but okay with it. I mean, we're still okay with it, but less okay. I imagine.
I'm not okay with it.
You're not okay with it.
No.
Well, Johnny has no issue with it. He's still playing all the time.
Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, like, now that it's like free of the creators and everything, like, it can kind of like live and breathe as its like own game now, which is kind of cool. And like the community project has like kind of been helping that or whatever. I mean, they're like working on ideas and stuff. Like, some of the balance is like still pretty rough, obviously, but it's like a fan driven thing or whatever. Nobody's getting paid or whatever, but it's still a cool like spot where it's in now, and like the game can be the game. It's like kind of solved, quote unquote, but I don't know. I think it's in a good spot. Yeah.
Johnny, I was going to ask you, are there, because I know you guys, there's different almost like committees. Is there talk of, like, I know you were talking about rules and maybe even 3D printing models. Is that something that is in the pipeline for the committee there?
I'm not I'm like not like super online with like that or whatever. I get like feedback from like one of my buddies who's like a bigger part of it, and like one of like developing one of the guilds. But I mean, there have been like talks and stuff, and like they're still like working on getting like acceptable proxies and everything. But 3D printing and like that stuff is not profitable, and it'd definitely be a fool's errand, I think, personally, to go after. But they might try it, so we'll see, I guess. I don't know.
I'm embarrassed now because I actually am a part of that committee, although I think I should resign myself. I just don't have the time to commit to it. I know I'm on the rules committee, and I did an errata for a couple of models, and I think it was beautiful. And Steamforged should say so. Yeah, if I say so myself. I fixed Steeljaw, guys. I fixed Steeljaw.
You did it.
Well, and let's be honest. I mean, we've seen this work before, right? Like, Blood Bowl was an example of a game being kept alive for a long time. A lot of people I know that play Ninth Age and love it, and that is completely upheld by the community itself. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over time. And whether, who knows whether it comes back either, via Steamforged or somebody else. So guys, let's take one more break. When we get back from this last break, I want to talk about the hangover. Let's talk about where everybody is now, what games they're playing, what gaps and voids were left by Guildball, and how are they being filled by other games? And is there something else out there that they have fallen in love with, or will it never be the same? We'll be right back. There are so many online retailers. It can be hard to find one that is trustworthy, has great prices, along with some reliable customer service. On the third floor, we love ordering our gaming goodies from Gadzooks Gaming. Their selection of terrain, miniatures, dice, custom decor, and conversion bits are curated for gamers by gamers. You'll find they have what you need and what you didn't know you needed to take your gaming fun to the next level. If you mention Third Floor Wars in the cart notes of your order, you'll also get a free gift. And you'll help support the podcast. Check out gadzooksgaming.com and mention Third Floor Wars on checkout to get that free gift. So now that, as of August, there is Guildball is no mas. Pete, we know where you went next, right? That's when you found Malifaux. I'd be curious, do you miss it, right? Has Malifaux filled the void, and you're glad that you don't play Guildball anymore, and you're all taken care of, or do you miss it a little bit, or is there things that you discovered in Malifaux that Guildball couldn't give you?
I mean, I do miss Guildball just because, like we were talking earlier, the community was it was amazing. I don't think that I haven't been to a game system yet, and obviously COVID's going to test that, or not test that, but where the community I've never seen a community experience like that so far in gaming, in my opinion. So yeah. I think, though, you'll start seeing other games pick up just because Guildball was so big for a lot of people. They're going to go to these other systems. And actually, that's what had me go to Malifaux. Georgia actually has a pretty big Malifaux scene down there. And one of my friends that used to live up here, I think you've had on the show, Brandon Lynch, he played Malifaux, and he had people like, Brian White was playing Malifaux. And I'm like, okay, I mean, these are like legit competitive players. Let me kind of check out the game a little bit. I looked at the model range. The model range was really cool. I actually think the thing I like better than Guildball, because Guildball does get monotonous. It is like doing the same things again, doing the same, opening conditions, activations. Yeah. And, I think that was something that when they were talking about the field test, I was actually like relating, because I was playing Malifaux pretty heavy then. I was like, listen, they should do something like Malifaux where even if it's like some secondary way to win the game, even if, well, I guess it'd be tertiary because there's already two, but another way to win the game, whether it's a scenario, whether it's this or that, just something to freshen up the game. Chris and I talked about like weather conditions that you could put randomly in the game, make terrain more of a thing where maybe they put out some kind of aura effects, and Malifaux gives you a lot of that. And Malifaux has the strats and schemes. The games you could play the same crews against the same crews, and you're going to get a different game most of the time. It's never going to be the same because the terrain means so much to it. The pool changes, and you can bring all these different flex models, and it's just a really impressive game. And that's what hooked me into Malifaux so hard. It filled Guildball, but then it added to it, which I found really impressive.
My story is very similar to your, Pete. That's exactly what happened with me. So Guildball saved me from Games Workshop. And then, I found I found Malifaux, and Malifaux saved me from Guildball, to be quite honest with you, because I got bored with Guildball. And Malifaux, and it was that extra layer. But that comes with downsides. Like one of the things that I missed was how simple Guildball was. I mean, that was part of the beauty of that game is, and I think, Mike, you might have said it, like I could teach somebody Guildball in 10 minutes and we could start playing, and we could, like as soon as they understood a playbook, we were done. Once I explained to you the playbook, then we're good to go. Let's play. You've got your cards. I've got my cards. You can't do that with Malifaux. Malifaux is a lot more of an involved game, and it's a little bit more of an intricate game, not quite as elegant as Guildball is, but that comes with some upsides too. How about for you, Johnny? I know you're still playing Guildball, but have you dipped into some other games?
Yeah, I've been I dabbled in Bushido a little bit. Tabletop Simulator.
I heard good stuff about that game.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, I like the dice mechanics on that. It's kind of like this cool double blind bluffing thing, and everything. I've Tabletop Simulator and COVID are things, so not the biggest fan of Tabletop Simulator. COVID's COVID, so
yeah.
But otherwise, the other game I've been big into is Judgment. It's some Australian guys doing it. Currently, it's 54 millimeter scale miniatures, so
wow.
Nice and big miniatures. They're beautiful.
Yeah.
They're
huge.
Yeah, they're beautiful. Yeah, they're all on 15
that's
millimeter
Inquisitor
bases.
size.
Yeah, it's so how it plays out. It's a 5v5 game similar, and it's a MOBA style almost, where each person has a effigy, it's called, which is your base, and the goal is to blow it up by collecting souls is the main mechanic. The first one to 5 souls wins, or you can just deal direct damage to their effigy.
Wasn't that what the Chicago guys went to a lot of?
Yeah, a lot of them went to that back in January when no one else was, or when Guildball kind of died down and stuff a little bit, and was on it's Death Rattle. But yeah, no, I've been pretty big in that. It's a lot of fun. Right now, it's kind of in a edition change, and they're going to hexes instead of open open measurement. So it's been a big adjustment and stuff. It's a lot of fun though. It's really cool. So
that's very, very cool. How about you, Mike? Infinity became your prime game again?
I'd say so. Yeah. I mean, I definitely also dabbled in Bushido, and I think post COVID, because Bushido is a really great game. It mixes some really cool new school game design mechanics with some really old school game design mechanics. And I actually knew Bushido way back before Guildball.
It's been around.
A friend of mine was one of their first US representatives or whatever they called them back in the day, and I almost got back in then, but the models weren't that great back that far ago, and now the models are good. The only problem with that is Tabletop Simulator, some games work well for that. Surprisingly, actually, Infinity works decently well. There are some things that are challenging, but Bushido is actually quite hard. Just because of the way that the running works and the way that the physics work with Tabletop Simulator. So I found myself I played some games of it, but because there's not as much of a big scene when it comes to things like Tabletop Simulator, I'm probably going to hold off until things are clear, and I know some of the guys locally have models and will play. So I will play Bushido, but I mean, I'm fortunate enough to live in, the Southwest U.S. right now, which is basically the Infinity Mecca, as they call it. Because Arizona has a huge community. Colorado has a huge community. New Mexico hosts the largest Infinity tournament in the U.S. With routinely 100. I think the last time Rumble happened was 150 odd players. And it's also an amazing community. I love the Infinity guys. I've known them for the ones here in Albuquerque for 10 years, way before I even moved out. So Infinity will be my game. And luckily Infinity just came out with a new edition, and they've been progressively making the game more and more in that new design, simplicity, toning things down. I mean, the big thing, for example, between this last edition and the new one is, Infinity used to be a game where there were leveled abilities or nested abilities. So you would have martial arts and your ninja would have martial arts, but because he had martial arts, he also had stealth and he had courage and he had all these other rules that you would never know unless you opened up a rule book and read the entire 3-paragraph, summary, which was, it was great once you knew it, but obviously a huge learning barrier. So I understand people who couldn't get into it. Now they've basically done the smart thing, which is just it's all broken up, so your model. Yeah, it's built into the profile now. So your model doesn't have all those things automatically. It has martial arts, and it might also have stealth, and it might also have this third ability. But, that allows for a lot cleaner design. So, the Corvus Belli guys, I also happen to know their design team, and they are, the Spaniards are ridiculous. I love them. They are awesome. Also, they're very much a Steamforged-esque kind of company. Despite the fact they've been insanely successful, it was a couple years ago, but they had a staff of only like 36 or something people. I'm sure it's bigger now, but they're still in a small town on the border of Spain and Portugal. So that's what's getting me the fix. It's a great game. It has a lot of things, that hit the thing. Guildball, like Pete said, has a really unique community that was both really good and also like really tight and competitive, and that was pretty unique. So I do miss that quite a bit.
The three games that I hear scooping the Guildball community up have been Malifaux, and we've definitely Malifaux has grown from Guildball. The other game is Bushido. I hear a lot of Guildball players went to Bushido. The other one is Marvel Crisis Protocol.
Absolutely.
Some of the MCP guys that some of the podcasts for MCP that I listen to are former Guildball players, and that was the game that hooked them. I haven't heard much going to Infinity, but I'm not a good judge of that because I'm not involved in the Infinity. The reason I know MCP is because I play it. That's why I know that they went there.
I actually think was it Singled Out, Mike? They actually switched to being an Infinity podcast, right?
Oh, okay. Well, that's
they
big.
have.
Yeah, they were one of the bigger Guildball podcasts.
Yep. I used to listen to Singled Out, so I didn't realize that. So yeah, it's interesting how, people kind of found it. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, which we did is, what was it that that made you go to these other places? And the guys that play Guildball, that play MCP, what I keep hearing them talk about is the simplicity and the elegance of the rules, right? The MCP has a very tight rule set. It feels a lot like Guildball in that way. And they, that's why they went there. And I hear the same thing about, from a mechanical standpoint, how innovative Guildball was. They find Bushido to be very innovative, and that's what attracted them there. And then the competitive depth is what I hear people saying why they went to Malifaux. And they went there. And I'm sure it's a similar story, I would have guessed, for Infinity being a very competitive game as well. Johnny, I'd be curious, is there games that you're hearing about that have piqued your curiosity, and that if at some point two human beings can be in the same room and play a game without wearing masks, that you think you would try out? Is there a game on your radar that you haven't played yet but has piqued your interest?
I've always liked a lot of the aesthetics of like Malifaux, but I guess some of the older editions kind of scared me off with some of the very fiddly models. I know there's one 10 millimeter model in height or whatever, which is just maddening and so small for me. But
if you have any trouble putting them together, I hear Mike's real good at it.
Yeah. Well, we were off air, but the reason I've tried to start Malifaux on 2 separate occasions, and I bought starter boxes and I couldn't finish building the starter boxes. And in one case with the Gremlins, I literally threw one of the models against the wall. And I was like, you know what? It's probably a good game. In fact, there used to be in New York, there used to be an incredibly competitive,
very good New York
group.
Team, yeah.
Yeah. The good guys over there, that I used to play with in various other games. Yeah. But I can't build the models. So unless Pete wants to build them and ship them over.
I can tell you what you're saying is not wrong, Mike. I can't sit here and tell you that your hot take is not a good one. I can tell you it's gotten better, but it's still tough. It's still a challenge to put them together. It's worth it.
I think another thing that the games that Guildball players are flocking to, you're not going to see Guildball players going to play 40K. You're not going to see Guildball players. I mean, there's exceptions, but you're not going to see Guildball players going to play War Machine. And the reason is you're going to see Guildball players going to communities. You're going to see them going to skirmish games. Yep. All the games we talked about are low model counts. And I think a lot of the Guildball players are also going more towards fantasy-esque games. You have Infinity and you have a couple other more futuristic games. And obviously people love their fantasy and their, sci-fi, but I feel like a lot of the games, Bushido, you see it's this fantasy based. I mean, I guess we could call it Asian theme.
It's anime. It's anime. That's why. That's why love the anime. Huge weeb. So that's right there.
I mean, that's why I love Malifaux, because you have the fantasy element, you have this cool Wild West element, Victorian, Cthulhu. It's just really weird, and I no pun intended, but it's just, I think you definitely see Guildball players going to a skirmish-based system. You're not going to see them going to this massive war game.
No, that makes sense.
I agree. I think the other thing you'll see, Guildball players will probably will go to systems that have solid dice mechanics or game mechanics. And when I say solid game, like they have to be based on a dice system or a card system that has reward skill and is like statistically rich and good. So Pete, that speaks to why, I mean, you're never going to have a ton of people going to Games Workshop from Guildball unless they really don't have another option, because I mean, as much as there's many other things about that game why it's super successul, but their dice system is like, from the 1980s. Before I was born.
That's actually the problem I have with Crisis Protocol and God Tier. I think on those two, and even what's the Star Wars game?
Legion.
The dice are so swingy in those games, it just pisses you off sometimes.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, there's not much else to say about it. I mean, you definitely have the exploding dice mechanics both in Marvel Crisis Protocol. Legion's got a version of it as well, and so does God Tier. So there's definitely more chance. What's interesting about MCP, Pete, is my first take on MCP is that it was going to be completely my beer and pretzel game. I accepted the fact that it wasn't going to be Malifaux. I have since learned, and there's going to be some episodes that either have already come out or will be coming out that talk about it, that there's even though the dice are swingier, there's other mechanics that I'm discovering as I'm playing it more that make me realize that mitigate that and that allow decisions still to be important.
Is that the Tarzan scenario?
Well, it's not even that. It's the power mechanic. I didn't realize how deep the power mechanic is when you start really understanding what that is, because it's a mechanic that, like any good game system, it's super simple. I can explain it to you, and you're like, okay, that makes sense.
Well, there's some models that they get super amped up.
Yeah. It ends up being a very interesting catch-up mechanic that mitigates. So if let's say that you and I are playing, Pete, and you have like a sick roll, right? You have like 3 rolls on 3 attacks and they explode all over the place and you do a shit ton of damage and just like wreck face. Well, what that does is it gives me power. And then when I activate, then I'm just going to punish you. Right. I'm going to punish you for doing what you just did.
I've noticed
and
that
it ends up. It's very interesting. It's very, very interesting. It's still not Malifaux, right? And it's still not Guildball. It doesn't mitigate that the way that built into the systems of Guildball and Malifaux it does as well. Well, gentlemen, this was very interesting. I actually learned something, which I appreciate, and made me realize that maybe some of the rage that I saw over that announcement was due, because I was sitting over here reading it going, geez, why you brought a bunch of babies getting all bent out of shape. They just said that they weren't going to support the game anymore, and you guys are like want to go burn down their house. But now I understand the background a little bit more, which is part of the reason I wanted to have you guys on. So as we're wrapping up here, Johnny, do you have any plugs or shout outs you want to get out there?
I guess you can, if anyone cares, you can follow me on Twitter at _Johnny Pastrami. Otherwise, Judgment is a really dope game. It's a lot of fun. Dice-wise, it is very similar to Guildball in terms of like dice curve. Everything just has defense 4 is kind of how it works out, and then kind of go from there. So I guess that. So
excellent. Well, I will link to your Twitter, and I'll link to the Judgment website, so people can check that out. How about you, Mike? Any shout outs or plugs?
I mean, shout outs to the Guildball community. If they're listening to this, I miss you guys. I mean, I do think people should definitely take a look at Infinity if they've played it before, pre and for, and found it too complicated. I always say there's always still that it is one of the more complicated game systems, but I do think it's quite rewarding. And plug wise, I mean, no. I am probably going to start up, use the Guildball, the old Guildball podcast hosting to do to restart some Infinity podcasts at some point in the future, but I'm terrible at self-promotion. So, yeah.
So, Mike, I'm going to have you back on because I've yet to do an episode focused on Infinity. I've done it for a lot of other games. So I'll bug you. I'd like you to come on and like to talk about the game and sell the game. So people can look forward to us doing that in the near future. Pete, you have nothing to plug, right?
I mean, I do, but whether you let me or not, that's in your hand.
Yeah, let's talk about.
Do people still listen to your podcast?
Oh, absolutely. We have dozens of listeners, Mike.
The five of us are never going to stop, Mike. We love this.
That's more than we had, so that's good.
I am a fanboy of Pete's podcast. So, Pete, talk about your podcast.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Just first off, if you come across a gamer and they tell you like, "Well, I did play Guildball," man, scoop those guys up and scoop those girls up because they are amazing gamers. It's one of the most engaging, friendly, just embracing community. I mean, there's people that I know around the world that I've met through events, and they're just a unique breed. So bring them into your game, whether it's Infinity or Malifaux or whatever.
They'll make the game better.
Yeah, they're going to make it better just because. Yeah.
Unless really it's Alex Spots. I
mean, he's playing Smash or something. I don't even know, but
probably, yeah.
Just a little side note before I plug the podcast. I did play Alex Spots once, and he crushed me as expected. Didn't let anybody down. So, but yeah, I mean, the Rage Quit Wire podcast, we do a lot of gaming. We're kind of focused on Malifaux. Chris is Infinity curious. He's too lazy to learn Bushido, so I don't know if we'll ever play that. But I told Chris, I'm like, if we're going to play Bushido, you got to learn it and you got to demo it and teach me. And we all know Chris, and that's probably not going to happen. But
that's a lot of initiative.
If you like a lot of saltiness, if you like hearing, about some of the more emotional stuff of gaming, I mean, we definitely get into it, and it's interesting. We don't have the biggest, followers or, all that stuff, but the people that enjoy raging out game wise, they're going to love the podcast just because we like to dig into it and do what we do.
Well, and that's, I mean, to be fair, Pete, that's a little bit of your shtick, right? But the reality is that the two of you guys know what you're talking about, and that's why I enjoy the show. I mean, you guys make me laugh, so that's part of it. But you guys have qualified voices. Even Chris sometimes has a qualified voice.
Well, here's the funny thing, Craig. So we actually met Mike because Mike heard one of our early episodes, and he disagreed with us so much that I invited him on the podcast, and I'm pretty sure he wanted
I just shit talked Chris.
I knew I liked you, Mike.
It was good.
Nah, I love Chris. He's a good guy.
I like Chris.
Is Stokes still doing episodes with you guys, or is he not playing games right now?
He's actually playing Middle Earth. John Stokes is our other host.
Sweet.
So, I mean, when we talk Middle Earth, which that's kind of a weird kind of game. I mean, it doesn't have a huge following, but in their area in the southeast, they actually had a tournament in a brewery, and they had like 40 people there. So, yeah, I mean, people
this is
awesome.
the GW game.
Yeah, it is. I demoed it.
Wait, it's Lord, right? Lord, not War. He's playing Lord of the Rings, not War of the Rings.
Yeah, it changed. Okay. It changed from War of the Rings, and
no, two separate systems.
Yeah, one's a mini game, one's a board game.
War of the Rings. They never did a second edition.
It was trade based.
Top 3 games GW has ever came out with.
It's phenomenal. It's a great game.
I played it when it came out, and
phenomenal.
Yeah, Stokes is into that, and yeah, he's still around.
Yeah, and for those of you that are Malifaux players, if you have not checked out Pete's series about summarizing all of the different factions, make sure that you check that out. Pete, have you been messing around with Explorers at all?
Yeah, so I actually just started looking through all the cards because I've kind of been out of it with the new job and stuff. And I mean, there's some really cool things going on there. I'm definitely into it. I mean, but so is everybody else. I'm going to be one of those people that probably holds back a little bit just because you're going to see explorers everywhere.
It's exciting that just the artwork alone has got me excited from a painting perspective.
I can use the Tyrannosaurus Rex in my WoW crew though, so I'm kind of excited about that.
And Titania.
That's what it is. That's what it is. Yeah. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, and I've got that 3D print of that T-Rex model, and you got to see it in person, man. It's a gorgeous sculpt. The only thing that's tough is that you have to glue each individual tooth into the mouth. So that kind of sucks. But but once you get all the scales on it, then it's just a beautiful model.
Okay, well, that's great.
All right, guys. This was a lot of fun, and I look forward to having all of you back again. And for those of you that stuck around to the end, thanks for listening. Take care. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch so you don't miss the avalanche of content we create. Links are in the show notes. Be sure to check out our shop on thirdfloorwars.com for the latest in gaming apparel and gear. There you'll also find the latest information for the US FO Tour. Find out where you rank in your conference or even in the entire United States. Get those models built, painted, and ready so we can see you at the next US FO Tour Masters event. Please take a moment to write a review of this pod on your favorite platform. Rating and reviewing helps us find more listeners almost as cool as you are. Be sure to share this feed with all of your friends who love tabletop gaming. Thanks for listening. Howdy folks, Craig here. Now if you love gadgets as much as we do, you're going to love the new Third Floor Wars Gadget Bundle from Schooner Labs. Branded with the logo of your favorite podcast, it comes with 2 measuring multi-tools, a compass stepper for those tight and important movements, along with a compact dashboard to track your turn, strat, and scheme scoring along with your soul stones and pass tokens. It is the perfect bundle for anyone who plays Malifaux or just wants to look cool while doing it. The link is in the show notes. Check them out and help support your favorite gaming podcast. All right. I'll probably
woke my son up.
What did I do?
No, I said I think I woke my son up.
Oh, sorry, man.
It's okay. He's used to it.
How old is he?
He's 12.
Nah, fuck him.
He probably
whatever.
Still like
He's not even a kid anymore.
Yeah.
He is.
He's probably smoking a cigarette.
I will kill you.
He's hoping you don't hear him light his joint. All right. Let's see. Probably because it's familiar. Pete, you mind if I start with you and we talk about Malifaux and what Malifaux has done for you?
Sure.
Oh wait, can you please? You guys need to talk about this. This is Craig. You don't know this. The reason I've tried to get into Malifaux, and I have no problem with the rules for the most part. But Pete knows this. Pete, do you know what my big complaint with Malifaux is? Have I ever told you what it is?
I don't think you have.
The 3 times I have have bought a starter pack or whatever to get into Malifaux, I picked bad choices. When building the models, they exploded because like trying to put together half of a what's it called, a Gatling gun barrel on one of those gremlins.
Oh yeah,
literally I threw it against the wall.
That's a rite of passage, Mike.
I know. You know what? Infinity's hard enough when it comes to that, and they've gotten a lot better. But oh god,
Infinity's new kits are actually pretty solid. I was impressed.
They are, yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah. But I have a shit ton of their old kits, and they are so hard.
I had an old Steel Legion kit that was a mess.
I have several half-built Infinity models, but I hate metal. But all right, I'll bring it back. All right. I'm probably going to start this off because my take on that post was different than a lot of people's.
Well, you're a reasonable person.
And it hopefully it'll piss one of you off and we can fight about it.
I'm gonna get my
best Alex.
So glad I agreed to come on your stupid podcast, Greg. All right, I'll bring us back. All right, who wants to start this one?
Me.
Whatever. You got to be careful. Yeah, go Pete. You got to be careful with the GW podcasts. You know, you might be listening to a Nazi podcast.
Don't
I don't know if you've heard about that.
What's his name? The lore asshole.
Yeah, that British guy. He's Norwegian. Sounds terrible and is he's Norwegian. Nazi. Oh, is it? Well, he has a fake British accent. I don't know.
What the hell is his name?
I was gonna say I've seen like the tweets calling him out and stuff, and I'm just
I'm pretty sure he weighs 80 pounds wet. and I think my daughter's taller than he is. It's 6. I mean, like the level of douchery that guy has, I can't believe I can't think of his name. But
I'm looking at like 40K. I mean, not necessarily racist, but 40K definitely breeds a lot of douchery in the community just by some of the nonsense that some of the players just let by and accept.
Yeah, it's two things, I think. I think one, it's the fact that it's huge, right? Yeah. So like, it's got a much bigger base, so as a result, you know, you're going to end up with more assholes. But there is something about the game though that attracts some
douchey people.
Like, well, there's people that that read the lore and don't realize like this is not good.
Well, I mean, when you're talking about breeding, you know, super soldiers and stuff, you can get some really crazy territory.
Like this is being presented as a bad thing, right? Like the Imperium is not a good thing. This is bad stuff. And there's some people that read it like, that's fucking cool. It's like, oh, Jesus Christ.
They're cheering on literal fascists. That's
exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Let's go for the Emperor of Man. What are you even talking about? What are you talking about? Anyway.
I mean, you just have to you don't even have to look. The Games Workshop term. I mean, it's not originally a Game Workshop term, but has made it into a popular political American lexicon. God Emperor.
Yep.
I mean, that's a Dune thing, but you know, they're not referring to Dune necessarily as much as they were referring to.
Did you find my guy's name?
Yeah. I couldn't find it. A lot of Nazis getting arrested.
Google Games Workshop douche, and just the page was just like loaded forever.
It was Games Workshop Nazi, and it was a lot of just real Nazis.
and now you're on the government list. Bill Barr will be knocking on your door. Probably asking you to join. All right. All right. So I am going to, let's see. So you'll notice, and if it ends up, we don't end up making it 2 segments, that's fine. But what I want to talk about is not the end. What I want to talk about in this segment is like, when did we start seeing problems?
What were some key moments?
Yeah. What were some early
There's definitely a lot.
I'm very interested what everybody else's answer is. I have like a blaring one. I'm going to
start with. I'm going to go for me clockwise. I'll go Pete, Johnny, then you, Mike. Yeah. All right.
Sure. Sounds.
Hey, are you still here? Look, the podcast is over, and you sat through all of the breaks and bloopers. Well, I mean, if you're here, you might as well run over to patreon.com and become a supporter. Don't forget to rate and review this podcast, too, while you're at it, on whatever platform you're listening to. I do appreciate you sticking around. Take care.